Welcome back to another great episode of Dr. J Radio Live. Of course, I'm your host, Dr. J, broadcasting from the City of Demons. That's right, not the City of Angels, but the City of Demons. Hollyweird, La La Land, as you all heard me say before, Weird California. And I welcome all other names for this great state that you want to call California. If you have any, please send them to me. Now, we are broadcasting from 107.7 FM UPRN, New Orleans, Louisiana, as well as Deprogrammed Radio in the UK, with terrestrial affiliates in London and Leeds and all around the world, in fact, even in Hong Kong, if you could believe that. That's right, folks. Hong Kong. We are also carried by iHeartRadio and required to give them a shout out, I guess, because they're carrying such a fringe topic, which I don't think it's that fringe anymore, especially when you have all these major channels and networks, as I always say, starting to put money into serious production of doing shows on paranormal and UFOs. And it's not just History Channel, folks, anymore. You've seen History A&E, which owns History. You've seen Nat Geo, Discovery, and now Travel Channel and Destination are probably even the biggest right now because they've put the more bigger budget shows on these subjects. So without further ado, let me introduce you the first guest. We have two guests today. They're both on a show that just started premiering called Alien Highway. And there are three people on that show, and the first one we're going to be speaking, we're only speaking to two of them, and the second one will sort of encompass the third one. So let me just introduce you, who you've all been waiting for, the one and only Miss Heather Taddy. Heather, welcome to the show. Heather.
Hello. Thanks for having me, Dr. J.
How are you? So welcome, very welcome to have you on the show.
Yeah, I'm excited to be here and chit-chat with you.
Now, let me bring you back in time. How did you first get involved? Because that's what almost everybody who does this has had something happen to them.
Oh, yeah. So it's probably started when I was pretty young, probably like 8, 9, maybe 13. 13 was when I really started investigating on my own. But I'd say my older brother got me into it, and the fascination kind of started with Ouija boards and spiritualism. I was really fascinated with the way Ouija boards worked and why people chose to use them. And I think from there, just hearing stories about my brother and his friends going to these haunted locations and, experiencing things. I think for me, hearing those stories, it always really intrigued me to do research on the subject and to get out there for myself and start investigating. So that's what I did probably around junior high. I would be the weirdo leading my friends into haunted abandoned buildings with a movie camera and a Ouija board. And we basically just hang out and try to catch evidence, try to get EVPs and just see, what we could find.
Have you ever had anything bad happen to you with the Ouija board?
Nothing bad. My cousin and I started playing it when we were pretty young, and we would basically talk to our grandmother on there, and we'd get these weird messages back that we'd go to our moms, and they'd be like, how did you know this information again? We never told you any of this. So a lot of weird things with that, but there were actually 2 or 3 times when I'd have a carload of people driving around to, our next destination, and I'd always have the Ouija board in my car. Mm-hmm. And there were a couple of times where we got pulled over for no reason. So my friends and I always had this long running joke that, anytime I have the Ouija board in my car and we're going to do an investigation, we get pulled over.
Well, let's hope it doesn't curse me, because I have actually 2 right behind me, Heather. Literally 2. I'm going to reach out. I'm going to grab both these suckers. Now, get this. I can't get anyone to do the damn Ouija board with me here at all. And unfortunately, I found only one person. It's a good friend, and she lives over 100 miles away, so she rarely comes over here. She was here recently for she's a caretaker, and so she's helping out with my father. Okay. And anyway, I got her to use it, right? Finally, after years of trying to find someone, we were able to contact this being named Zoza. And it just was speaking gibberish to us. It literally, we cannot ask anything and get any answers that weren't just a bunch of letters. And when we decided to say goodbye, which is the official rule, right? It wouldn't let us.
Uh-huh. Oh, you better be
Yeah.
careful.
No, seriously, like we were like really trying to pull on whatever you want to call that little, you know, what do you call that piece that that has the eyeglass on there that you put your fingers on?
Oh, the planchette. The
Yeah,
planchette.
there you go. That we were
You
literally
talking about that?
we had to
Yeah.
drag that over goodbye because it wouldn't flow easily as it should because the board itself is like very sleek, and underneath the planchette
Yeah.
have underneath on the three corners have a little bit like I don't want to say velvet, but something soft enough to let it glide freely. But yeah, that was the probably the craziest
Yeah.
experience I've had. Now let me ask you about this new series you started, Alien Highway.
Mhm.
Where is it
Yeah, it
premiering, and
sounds magical, doesn't it?
what are you guys talking about?
So we're going to places, mostly in the Midwest and the West, where people have seen UFOs or have claimed to have an encounter with an extraterrestrial. And, we're going to places where history may be repeating itself, basically areas where, say, in the 70s or 60s, there were major sightings and it's kind of repeating itself. So we're doing interviews with people, talking to a lot of locals, investigating from every angle, trying to catch as much evidence as we can and really thoroughly analyzing it to try to figure out why these things are happening.
So you're also
That's the big
looking
question,
for, I'm
why?
thinking, UFO waves, right? If they've happened in certain hotspots and they stopped, are you looking in patterns to see if they're coming back? Like you said, history repeats itself?
Yeah, yeah. There's one specific episode that's going to premiere later, and it's weird because it's actually one of the first ones that we filmed, where we go someplace to a town where all these people are kind of seeing the same thing, and we all get them together. And so yeah, you want to ask yourself, is it mass hysteria, or are these people really experiencing these things? So it's still all a big mystery,
One
with this
thing
subject.
I love that's a subtopic about UFOs in general. Actually, there's a couple that I always tune to. See, my good friend Preston Dennett writes the books UFOs over California, New York, Nevada, Mexico, etc.
Yeah.
And so the first time, every time he writes a new book on a new state, I look at the index. I'm even doing it right now, the contents, and I'll tell you what I look at. First, and very first that I look for is crash and retrievals. The second I look for are
Mhm.
landings and humanoids, and then of course I look at abductions and contact. Now, what in all your studies and through this episode that you're doing, or not this episode, but the series, Alien Highway,
Mhm.
have you come across any crash and retrievals?
Well, our episode coming up next is Roswell, which is a pretty interesting one. But other than that, I'm trying to think of all the episodes we did. They're all pretty different.
You mean all the
Um,
different crash and retrievals?
not always. No, I mean we've had some people that have mostly people have seen things in the sky. We talked to a lot of ranchers who've had cattle mutilations they can't explain, and they go in their house and they experience paranormal activity. So it's all pretty varied. And we filmed 8 episodes. So the ones I'm trying to think of the ones that are premiering. I don't know. I guess Roswell. I mean
That's the
the
crash
big
and
one,
retrieval.
but
That is
other than that,
the reason why that happens to be the one that everyone talks about is because it's the only one that the military accidentally released the info about it before they retracted it. You have no other crash and retrieval where the
yeah,
military says we retrieved a crash disk or a flying saucer or a space vessel of any kind like that. This is the first, and that's what makes it so exceptional, and that's why 74 years later, here we are still talking about it, even though all the witnesses, I believe, if not
yep,
all, are literally dead at this point. It's just the children of the witnesses, so
yeah,
it's carried in that way. Now, you also said you
mhm.
talk with people who have had contact.
There is one episode where we have a client who did have a contact with something, and I don't think I can really talk about that, but it's a really interesting story, and that episode kind of reminded me of the format of like the old Paranormal State episodes, because it was more so he was experiencing things in his house and he was seeing things, and he did have an abduction experience that we talk about in the episode.
Do you recall the details of what he told you about the abduction episode? Because it seems to me that a lot of them are following a same formula.
It was something that happened to him when he was probably about 16 or 17. Yeah, that I think that episode is probably maybe the second to last to premiere. So it'll probably
second to last
July
premiere of the 8, right? So this is episode number 7.
Yeah. Yep.
Now,
yeah.
Have you, before you started Alien Highway, have you yourself talked to people who've had their abductions themselves?
A few here and there.
What I'm trying to find is how many
had.
different species have people talked about that you've met?
Oh, ooh. I mean, the thing you hear about the most are the graves.
Yes, very much so. As a matter of fact, I hear three sizes of them. Really, you hear the normal 3-foot ones. A lot of them describe either a black suit or nothing at all. Just almost naked, if you want to call that, because they're supposed to be glorified robots. But then you also hear about the people who talk about the ones that seem to be in charge, that are truly extraterrestrial and biological, and those seem to be in the 5 to 7 foot range, as opposed to the 3-4 foot range of the smaller grays. But yes, you're absolutely right that is the most common theme of what seems to be taking people, and a lot of females who are taken describe that they're checked for a pregnancy test, and a lot of them have their ova removed. Men have their sperm removed, and they seem to be creating hybrids as a theme. Have you ever talked to people about hybrids?
No, that's more of a question for Chuck, because he has more experience. Like, he's been investigating this specific topic for like 35 years. So he's talked to a lot of people. In our episodes, I don't think we talked to anybody about hybrids. Yeah, not that I can think of.
There's a question in the chat for you. This is from Lasha Senyak. Did anyone that she interviewed ever show her scoop marks or implants? I think that's an interesting question.
No. Not in this round of Alien Highway, no.
I really hope after Roger Lear died, the alien implant doctor, that someone steps up to be that new doctor that starts to remove these, for free. That's what Dr. Roger Lear was doing. If people just covered the basic cost to, for local anesthesia, unless it was something that required general anesthesia. He did everything for free, and ever since his passing in 2014, it seems to have ceased. And he had 17 that he had removed, and they were 3 different types, and they were really weird because they were made of metals that we can't identify at all. Some that aren't even from anywhere on this planet or our solar system. And also, they were extremely hard to cut open. They were causing bone and other things that are not magnetic to become magnetic when they were in their presence. And get this, they were sending a signal consistent with deep space. Somebody in deep space was receiving that signal.
That's insane.
It is, really. I know. I did 3 documentaries on the topic. That's why. And he was a great person, and he lived not too far from where I am. And before his death, we did a lot of interviews, which of course, were ended with the documentary. Now, let me ask you: before you did Alien Highway, you were on Paranormal State, so you did a lot of ghosts, right? Ghost hunts.
Yeah. Yeah, so Paranormal State, it was based off of a student-run paranormal club at Penn State University where I went to college. And, we went into, the club started out just investigating buildings on campus because Penn State surprisingly has a couple really haunted buildings with some interesting history. So it started with that, and then they put on this huge conference where they'd invite, people in the paranormal world to come and lecture and investigate and things like that. So I joined the club, and our early episodes, we went and we helped families that, we would get calls and emails from families all over the U.S. that were afraid to live in their own home because they were having these experiences they couldn't explain. A lot of them involved children, and, they weren't really educated on the paranormal. They don't know why these things happen to them. So we would go in and we would set up our equipment and spend the night there and bring in people to help them and try to figure out, why they were experiencing these things.
I've never known that. That's
so on the show. My
You're breaking up a little bit, Heather. You said on my show, and then
Oh, no.
I lost you after that.
Oh.
You're here. I can hear you now.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I'm here. So on the show, I'll talk about a little bit what I did on the show. I was the documentarian, so I always had a camera on me, and I filmed a lot of behind the scenes and film interviews, and then I would also look over tech. We would have like a little HQ base we'd set up, and we'd have our computers and surveillance cameras. So I would go to the rooms with the most activity, set up cameras, try to get good angles so that we could, record them overnight and go back and review them. But I did historical research. I interviewed witnesses. So I did a little bit of everything when it comes to being on a paranormal investigation team.
Now, you mentioned that you started with investigating ghosts at Penn State. I didn't know until you literally told me that was the start of Paranormal State, but even in general, I didn't know that there was a history of hauntings. So would you say these were ghosts or poltergeists, or what's the difference between the two?
I would probably say spirits because so one of the presidents, President Atherton, is actually buried on campus. His grave is there. I don't know if his body is actually buried there, but there's an auditorium there called Schwab Auditorium, which is one of the main haunted buildings at Penn State. And I know one of the earliest and first investigations with the club when I wasn't in it was that auditorium, and they would see President Atherton, I think, like walking across the stage, and then right across the street, there's another building that there's said to be somebody buried in the attic that you can see them looking out the little attic window. And there's one other one. I can't. Oh, the library. The library at the main campus. In 1968, 1969, there was a girl named Betsy that was actually murdered in the library.
Ooh.
And to this day, no one knows what happened. No one saw anything. Yeah. And the library is really creepy. I used to purposely study in there to see if I could experience anything, but they call it the stacks because there's these little like staircases that go up, and it's super dark and eerie in there. But yeah, supposedly she was murdered in there, and there's news articles, and it's a pretty well-known thing.
Now, I know I don't remember who it was. I think it was someone from either, I know it was definitely from one of the two, Alien or Ghost Hunters and Ghost Adventures, one of the two shows. I had someone, and that one of the people on the respective shows was telling me that one of the cases that they showed on that show, and I sound really stupid right now not remembering who it was, but it was someone I did back this past December, and what he told me is that on one episode when they went into this house, that the ghost was trying to communicate with them, and it was sending them to basically to find a book inside of a tree. And what it did is it solved a 60-year-old murder. And I thought that was fantastic because right there it seemed like that ghost had a purpose. So the reason I'm bringing this up to you now, Heather, is because I'm wondering if the unsolved murder that happened at Penn State, is that ghost trying to communicate with you or the other people on that team to possibly find out or let you guys know what happened to her?
That's a good point, and I wish I could have been there because I think that was Paranormal State, or not Paranormal State, but PRS. I think that was their first investigation, and that was like 2 or 3 years before I joined the actual club. But I would have loved to have been in on that investigation to kind of see. And to this day, supposedly they drew a circle around where they were sitting. They did the investigation. I think to this day, people can still kind of see that circle, but I haven't been there in so long.
Now,
but it's a pretty interesting story. That's a good point, though.
Yeah, it really is. Now, have you ever been involved in exorcisms?
So on Paranormal State, there were a couple episodes where we did deliverance, which is a milder form of an exorcism. I was never physically present for those, but I was there on the episodes. But they would have, because Katrina and I were both trainees, to start in those seasons when we had cases, real serious cases like that. So we would often go home when they would do the deliverances and things like that. We wouldn't actually be there.
Let me ask you the two questions that I always ask for people involved in ghost hunting, right? Have you ever come across a ghost that spoke to you in a dead language, something like Sumerian?
Oh, no. That's really fascinating. But no, I mean, there have been times when I've recorded, I've had digital audio recordings where I play them back and you can kind of tell something's trying to talk to you and it could be in another language, but I've never had an instance where I, went back to find out, oh, this is Sumerian or, another language.
So it was, but to you, it was basically gibberish. You couldn't understand it, right?
Yeah, so maybe as a matter, it could have been another language,
Yeah, I mean, very possibly can if it was something you couldn't understand, because even though most of the time the answer that I get from people who are involved in ghost hunting when I ask that question is a no, there have been yeses, and it's been whether it be Native American Indian or something like Mayan, or even it always occurs in their respective areas. So if you're going to be in where this ancient Sumeria was and you find a ghost there, that's where it would be. So that's there's only been a few incidents where I've heard of ancient Greek or Sumerian or Aramaic even, but I thought those were fascinating. Let me hit you with the second one that I always love to ask, and now especially since you are involved in UFOs. Have you ever had an alien of a ET?
No, you mean a ghost?
A ghost? Have you ever had a ghost of an ET? That's right. Yeah, sorry about that.
No. I never have. I'm trying to think. No, I mean, I know that's something I would definitely remember, but I'm just trying to backtrack to think if.
Well, that one actually gets more no's than the first one, and I've only had a few where it said yes, where the ghost was appearing as a gray or a large praying mantis or something like that. But literally, I ask these questions because I'm always looking for the answers, Heather, because there's so few of them.
Yeah.
Most of the time, it's just like you said, no and no, and you know what? It's totally understandable because there's so few of them. But there is stuff that you could answer for me. Now, we talked about possessions. Now, have you ever, had a case where someone called you to the house and you dealt with inanimate objects, like, say, Annabelle, for one? When I think of inanimate objects, I'm thinking of a doll or something like that, a possessed item. Teddy.
Oh, yeah. I mean, we had one episode where I cannot remember the specific name of the episode or where it was, but I remember they had a Homer Simpson doll that had like no batteries and no one could explain it, but it would talk.
Wow. Holy crap.
It wouldn't say things it was programmed to say.
Well, you mean, was it being
I haven't
vile?
thought about that in a long time.
Was it being vile in things you can't say on radio, or just being mean?
No, nothing like that. Oh man, I can't remember. This was so long ago. This is one of our earliest episodes.
What year, if you could give an approximation?
2006 probably.
I know people are going to be looking for this afterwards. The Paranormal State 2006.
Yeah. And I don't even know if it made the episode, but another one that I think of is we did a episode called Haunted Piano, and this lady, she went antiquing a lot. She'd bring a lot of different antiques in her home, and she brought this piano into her house, and ever since she brought in the piano, she started having like crazy activity, and she had a deactivated cell phone.
Mm-hmm.
It was like a deactivated flip phone that would randomly turn on and light up, even if the battery was out of it, and it would say 666 on it for like no reason. It really freaked her out. But yeah, the piano, like when she would flood on it, so there's no gun. Just all this stuff happened because she brought this piano in her house.
That's weird, and so that would show that an item that has demonic possession or something that's possessing it, right, will obviously affect others and even an entire area like a room.
Yeah.
Okay, I see a question for you in the chat.
Yeah, you never know who had these. Okay.
The chat, where did it go here? What is the weirdest or funniest ghost experience you have encountered? And that's asked by Dezombified.
Oh, weirdest or funniest? Oh man, I'm so horrible with these questions. It's so hard to narrow it down. Well, maybe the weirdest and probably the most frightening, actually. I was going to that. We did this investigation, and I did all the casework for this in the office where duty side of this case went to. It was a church that's currently being renovated in Topeka, Kansas, and there are these caretakers that actually lived in the church, and they were trying to renovate it, but they had to halt the renovations because there was so much activity happening that it really terrified them. And on the episode, Ryan and I, who Ryan's the lead investigator, we were down in this area. I think it was like the old showers, and it was a really haunted area in the basement where everybody had these really negative feelings about it. No one would go down there. And we were reading this writing that was on a cabinet, and all of a sudden Ryan was standing right in the doorway of one of the showers, and all of a sudden, out of nowhere, something with force, like, pulls him back, as if something grabbed the back of his shirt or hoodie and just pulled him back. And I saw it all with my own eyes, and I watched him just, like, get pushed back, and it was a pretty freaky experience.
Lasha Senyuk is asking, did she ever get scratched or touched by a ghost? Interesting, very interesting question.
Yeah, I've never been scratched, but I have actually been touched. It was a really interesting episode we did in Oregon where this woman was seeing a headless ghost in her house. She was having all these experiences hearing voices. She always felt like something was watching her. When she would go into the bathroom and shower, she felt things touching her. And so on Paranormal State, we would do dead time, where we'd kind of turn off all the electronics and try to communicate with whatever would be in the house. And on the show, you can always see me. I'm always the one that kind of ventures off on my own because I want to have experiences and I kind of want to be secluded from everybody else. So I was actually in the bathroom, and I had a camera pointed on me, and I was holding my own camera. And I was leaning up against the sink, and my arms were straight. I was just leaning. I was just hanging out. And something, the way I can describe it is, it wasn't hot, it wasn't cold. Something touched my left elbow enough for me to bend it and react. And nothing was around me, nothing that could have bumped me. Yeah, and I still can't explain that to this day. But, I mean, you can see my reaction in the episode. Luckily, I was standing right where there was a camera on me, and you can kind of see half of myself standing there. You can see my arm, and I just looked down like I see something, but nothing's there. And it was interesting because there was another group in the other room. They were in the living room, and around that same time, they were also experiencing activity.
Now, let me jump back to the UFOs for a moment. You said you're looking for places where history repeats itself, right? Have you found any hotspots that say were active, say, 10, 20, 30, 40 years ago and have been active since?
Oh, yeah. We went to, well, our first episode was Skinwalker Ranch. I don't know if you were able
Ooh,
to catch that one, but
absolutely. I
Skinwalker
know
Ranch,
that. Yes,
yeah.
yes.
Do you know about Skinwalker?
I
Okay.
do.
So obviously
Shapeshifters and all that. Yes.
yeah. So that was our first episode, and that place is regarded as a hot spot for everything from UFO sightings, unusual activity, monsters. People have seen dinosaurs, like just the most insane stuff, and they think there's a portal on this ranch, and the ranch is in the direct path of the Skinwalker. So when we were there, obviously a lot of this stuff happened to the people that owned the ranch, and to Robert Bigelow and his team that then bought the ranch, and they were doing studies there. But like that whole area in the Uinta Basin has a history of events since like the 1800s. And so the lights and UFOs that people have been seeing, Native Americans have been seeing, that all predated this ranch. So there's something just really odd about that area, but people are still experiencing things there today the same as they were, in the 1800s.
And I've heard that some people are even experiencing what would be considered like cavalry, right, from the Civil War passing by. Weird, weird things that are 150 years old
Oh,
at this
yeah.
point.
Mhm. Yeah, that also reminds me of Gettysburg. I've done a couple investigations there, and you think about people that go to Gettysburg and how on a basis people are dressing up in the costumes and they're recreating, these battles and scenes and things like that. And there's constantly people walking around dressed in those costumes, and it makes you wonder if that energy is still stirring up that residual energy of the battles and people seeing, the troops walking on the fields. So that's a
There's
really
actually
crazy
an
history.
unsolved mysteries case that really opened my mind to Gettysburg being haunted. They were doing a recreation, and out of the blue, they were taking a break, right? So there was a couple people
Uh-huh.
on off the side somewhere. I don't know. I've never been there myself, but they said out of the blue came walking up a soldier who's wearing the same costume, same color, all blue, and he said that he looked very dangy, like someone who hadn't showered in a long time, like a lot of grudge on his face and stuff. Bearded man. And he said something to them,
Mhm.
but that wasn't what was important. What he did was is he handed them each two cartridges for their rifles. And after
Oh.
the ghost left, the ghost just it didn't disappear. It walked off, and they didn't see who they thought it was.
Mhm.
Maybe someone at the reenactment. But it wasn't until after when they had the uh, rounds or cartridges looked at that they were found to have been from that time period, from the Civil War, and they were
Wow.
brand spanking new.
Ah, that's wild.
Yeah,
Huh.
that's actually something that really introduced me to Gettysburg, so I wanted to mention that to you. Here's a question from Lasha Senyak. Are all ghosts stuck in the past? Do some know that there are in the present? I guess it's misspelling a little bit, but yeah, you get the gist of it.
Yeah, can you repeat that one more time?
Yes, are all ghosts stuck in the
It was like cutting
past,
out.
or do some know that they are in the present?
I'd say it's probably a mix from my experience, what I've experienced. Ghosts usually aren't aware of their surroundings, whereas a spirit, is the actual living being, the soul, so they're more aware. But yeah, I mean, I'd say a lot of ghosts are just residual energy that they're stuck in this groove of repeating energy. If that makes sense.
A friend of mine, who you might know, Patty Negri, always said big in life, big in death. So if that's where most of their experiences were, then that's where their most of experiences are as ghosts. And I always thought that made perfect sense. So if that's where they had a lot of energy, a lot of deaths, and screaming and pain and emotions going on at right there at Gettysburg, was it 50,000 people, something like that, died in one single battle, and that's why there's a lot
Yeah.
of haunting there.
Yeah, that's definitely true that ghosts are definitely tied to the location of, their deaths, because, you go into these houses and buildings, old buildings, and it's always, the most tragic things, suicides happening there where the energy is kind of still sticking around and there's unfinished business.
I asked you about inanimate objects, but Tricia Mako is asking, do you have any haunted objects yourself?
Oh, I don't. I don't have any. A long time ago, I picked up from a friend, I picked up a really old wooden Ouija board, probably from the 60s or 70s. I'm not sure exactly the era of it, but I found that when I had it in my house, I just all of a sudden started getting all this bad luck, like really bad things were happening. So I actually, I buried it somewhere in a disclosed location.
Is that
But
how
no,
to
I
get
mean,
rid of the whatever's tied to it? Because I know one room where I'm broadcasting, one of the rooms is very haunted and happens to be where I am right now. I mean, you constantly have changes of weather flow. There's constantly the feeling of someone watching, and more importantly, when people are around, they always report that their footsteps, literally footsteps going
yeah.
up and down the hall, and people are like, "What the hell is going on?" And I don't know what the history of where I am at has, if there's anyone that died here or, any time in history, literally. But that was just something that always scares me. So I'm asking you, is how the hell do I get rid of it?
Well, there's a couple things you can do. First, it would be really interesting if you did do some historical research just to validate. That was always the one thing I loved, just trying to confirm and validate who's passed away and what's happening there
So
and
you
connect
mean
it to
by
what's happening.
using a Ouija board or inviting people who do?
Oh no, I wouldn't advise you to use a Ouija board. I don't think that would be a good idea. But I would, you could get some holy water and just there's little prayers that you can say if it's really bad, or while things are happening, you could just try to communicate and say, hey, if you feel like it's threatening, just say, hey, this is my room. You have no business being here. Because a lot of times people will have spirits that are pretty friendly and they don't mind it, where other times people have really annoying, threatening presences they want to get rid of. So I think just by confirming that, you're in charge, a lot of times that can help a situation if it's not that serious.
I'm actually going to take those steps and try them. Thank you. I appreciate for that. And let me tell you, this little crazy story is about 7 years when I started this show. And after
Mm-hmm.
this, I was the last person here. And after this show ended and I was, turning everything off to leave the room and leave the location, is
Uh-huh.
something appeared on the wall and it was like a blue light, and I thought it was coming from one of the windows. So what I did is I put my hand in front of it and I
Mm-hmm.
noticed that the light was still emanating from the wall. And that memory
Huh.
has still stuck with me. I'm like, what the hell could cause the light to emanate this very weird, like neon blue sort of but it was nothing. It was just it was in the wall, very very shiny. If you want to say that, it had a lot of light to it. But yeah, it was
Yeah.
enough where it lit up the room, and it was definitely trying to capture my attention because it was on the opposite wall of where I was about to leave.
Huh. There's a theory that's kind of always stuck with me that I think a researcher in the 70s came up with it. Have you ever heard of the stone tape theory?
No, please tell us.
Well, it's based on the suggestion that buildings and materials are able to absorb a form of energy from living beings. during high times of emotional stress, energy can be stored for like an unspecified amount of time, and it will replay.
Did we lose you, Heather?
The replay is triggered by
you at
someone
retry.
with a right attribute.
There you go.
They seem to set off. Oh, can you hear me?
Yeah, no, yeah. I was saying we lost you for a second, then I got you back. So.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I wonder why the connection
is. It's just a really fascinating theory.
Here's another question, if you're willing to take it, because I'm having a little trouble hearing if you finished. Were you able to finish?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Okay, because it unfortunately didn't come through. So if I didn't hear it, they didn't hear it. Obviously, can you repeat what the theory is again? Let me see if I can encapsulate what you said. You said that the building materials are able to absorb the spiritual material.
Yeah, they're able to absorb a form of energy from living beings. Like, say there's a room somewhere and there were, someone was brutally murdered there. That energy can be stored for an unspecified amount of time. And when certain people come in that room, it can be played back like a recording, like residual energy.
Now, here's a question for you. You know what? That theory makes sense, because why the hell would so many buildings be haunted as opposed to, say, outdoors, right?
Yeah, true. I mean, there's a lot of battlefields, but yeah.
Now, let me ask you a question from the chat. This is also from Lasha Senyak. No, I'm sorry. This is one I asked you before. There was another one here. This is from Noberto Kales. He goes, I once saw a basketball-sized orb at night. Could that be a spirit?
Well, so my take on orbs, a lot of the times I think they can be explained. A lot of times I think it's either refraction of light, or and it could be an indication of an area that contains a great deal of psychic energy. But a lot of times I can kind of debunk them in a way, if that makes sense.
Yeah, of course, because to prove that they're not true, you mean that some people are maybe hearing things in their head, or the place is not haunted, is what you're saying?
Kind of, yeah.
Because it's
like
UFOs, for instance, right? A lot of people mistake them for natural objects, but there are a substantial amount of cases that are truly unidentified flying objects.
Yeah.
So, what about people who say they see orbs, but they see faces in the orbs?
So that's something I think is way worth investigating, because I have seen some pretty compelling images of orbs, little balls of light that do have a face in them, and I something worth looking into. I always like seeing photos where you can actually see something.
Yeah, and it's weird because sometimes the expressions on the face, they look like either they're not mad, but they're not happy either. They look kind of lost and a little like they're annoyed. That's the impression of what I've seen. I've seen a handful of images from solid people that I know were not tampered with, and I definitely believe their stories of what happened to them. And when they capture those orbs on, whether it be the cameras that they had installed on their property that were motion activators or things like that, it's meant to capture weird things around their house, that they ended up capturing a few of these orbs, and they'd have intelligence, because you could see they wouldn't just fly from one direction into another. They would change turns in different rooms. They would go into the wall and come out of the wall on the other side of another room. Weird stuff like that, and yet they had faces of them in them. Now, why do you think ghosts are able to be like those orbs as opposed to just appearing as the apparitions of the bodies that they inhabited when they were humans, alive?
I don't. Maybe it's hard for them to materialize and be present, so they take the form of other situations. if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it does. It totally does. Now, so obviously you started Alien Highway, but when did you start getting into UFOs from the paranormal field? Because obviously, if you were doing Paranormal State, you were investigating. First, you started with, like you said, a club, and you were investigating the buildings at Pennsylvania State, and then, of course, other places like Gettysburg, and I'm assuming other homes and other buildings. But at what point did you start realizing there's a possible connection between paranormal experiences and UFOs?
Yeah, well, I remember being young, and I've always had a fascination with looking at the stars. It was just something my friends and I would do on a clear night. We'd get into really interesting conversations about, could there be life on other planets? What did we just see in the sky? So I've always been into that. And I remember in third grade, we had this book club where you could order all these different kinds of books. And I was always the only person that ordered the alien books. I always ordered the alien abduction books because I thought they were really fascinating. And my teacher started to call me an alien, which, whatever, I was fine with because I was always, different from everybody else. And I was an alien. And I still kind of am an alien in a way. But so it started with that, but, doing these investigations now where we're focusing mostly on UFOs and experiences like that, you find a lot of people and a lot of the ranchers that, they'll have something happen to their cattle that there's no explanation for, their cattle being mutilated in the strangest ways. And then they'll see, right around the same time, they'll see these unexplained lights in the sky. And then they'll go into their house and they'll experience paranormal activity. So it's a question we're asking ourselves, is it all linked? Is it all the same thing? Or, is there some kind of dimension these things are passing through? Are ETs aliens? You know what I mean? There's so many different theories you can expand on for all of this.
Well, a lot of people talk about this high strangeness that seems to occur, say, after seeing a mutilated calf, or after seeing, or even being in a crop circle, or whether they saw something in the sky, a disc or an orb, or any one of the other multitude of shapes that these ships seem to come in triangles, for instance, or even seeing beings on the ground. Talk about that this high strangeness follows them afterwards, and they also talk about psychic experiences, that their psychic powers seem to improve. Do you know why that happens?
I don't know. I can't really answer that question, but I know that I've talked to people where they've come in contact with a UFO, not even that far distance, and the one guy said he saw a red beam coming from the UFO, and immediately after that, for 2 weeks, he felt this sensation of electricity going through his body, and the doctors couldn't explain it. But that's something that happened as a result of seeing that UFO.
That's weird, and I've always wondered why it has that high strangeness. And now I've seen a couple things but they weren't up close and personal. There was mass witnesses, and I didn't have any strangeness other than that one particular room in that building that I was broadcasting in that I mentioned that pretty much scared the hell out of me. It seemed to have left me more alone, but it seems to be more when other people are around, it bothers them. Some people that are like, you could say have a lot of psychic powers, really don't even want to come near that room. So I'm definitely going to do what you said and bring some holy water like that. Some people could be
more sensitive.
Now, having the two Ouija boards with literally right behind me where we're talking right now, I'm sure isn't helping the situation very much. I wonder if that's what's causing the interference with you, because truthfully, this is a landline calling you. I wonder how it's possible to even have any weird breaking up noises. But
yeah, because I'm looking at my phone, and my service has been fine. That's why I've been trying to move around to see if it's my phone, but it's not.
Yeah.
It has cut out, and I'm like, oh.
Obviously we've noticed both these. You've noticed I've cut out when I was asking you something, and I've noticed you've come out when answering something. So it's clearly something's interference, and I'm assuming if it's the entity or if it's the Ouija boards being in proximity. But I thought it'd be cool to have them on. While I was talking to someone from Paranormal State. That's why I brought them in the room.
Where did you find them? Or like, if it really...
Well, the first one I bought actually at Psychic Eye, if you're familiar with Psychic Eye in California. They also have locations in Las Vegas. But
I've heard of it.
The second one was given to me, and it was given to her, and she said that one was, the reason why I got a second one in the first place was because what did you describe that little item that the placard you said? Planchette?
Oh, the planchette.
Yeah, the planchette
Yeah.
does not glide on the board so well because it's not very soft. If you turn the board upside down where it has no letters and numbers, it's smooth enough for the planchette to move. But when it's face up, it's so hard. It's like it doesn't make sense why it would be this way. So someone gave me something where it actually is smooth enough to work. But she said that it seemed to have more properties of, it was more active, meaning that almost every time she used it, she was able to contact an entity. Unfortunately, I haven't seen her in a few years, so she was the person that we would always use the Ouija board, but it wasn't until recently that I had something negative happen with, I mentioned that Zoza, that's what it was, Zoza. I was like, what a weird name. And then I actually read that isn't that like the spirit that
you don't want
haunts
to mess
it?
around with that.
Yeah, so that scares the hell out of me.
How do you spell it? Do you know how did it spell it?
Zoza. And I know from reading online, Zozo is the spirit that haunts the Ouija board, but Zoza, I have no idea. And like I said, it was not speaking English because, it was weird, letters, just total gibberish, like K, Q, I, literally things that made no sense at all. So that's why we were attempted to end the session and it wouldn't let us end. Now, I know since we really have ran for the first 15 minutes fairly fast, tell us what's the most memorable experience you had before you started Alien Highway on Paranormal State, and then also tell us the most memorable moment in Alien Highway. So that's a two-sided question.
Oh, can I start with Alien Highway?
Absolutely. Yes,
okay.
Please.
The episode coming up, which I don't want to spoil it too much, but the episode coming up this week, we actually go to Roswell. We go to Roswell and we go to Corona, and we actually get to go to the debris site where the crash was said to happen.
Yes.
Where Mac Brazel, found this debris. And it was really fascinating because we got to interview someone from the Proctor family. So we interviewed Sandy Proctor, which was the brother of Dee Proctor, and of course Dee was present with Mac Brazel, the rancher, when they found this material, came up on this material. So it was really interesting to kind of go straight to the source and hear what his family thought about all of this, and it was really interesting because Sandy Proctor's parents actually had an interesting sighting before. Right before the Roswell crash, but it was just really cool to talk to him, and that's included in the episode that's going to premiere tomorrow night. But just to go to the debris site and stand there and think, like, what really happened here in the desert back in 1947?
Well, one thing that really freaks me out, and I don't know how this came about, to be honest, Heather. I'll tell you what it is the I-beam. Remember the I-beam that Jesse Marcel described, and Jesse Marcel Jr., before his passing, recreated and was selling them online? Well,
Yes.
recently Tom DeLonge
Yeah.
showed that it spelled eleftheria in a hybrid form of Greek. Now, I'm Greek and I could see that, but the picture that Tom DeLonge has, where he says, where he shows the letters that spell it eleftheria, then he shows the Greek alphabet and that spelling of
Uh-huh.
eleftheria, which means freedom. However, I don't remember seeing that, and when I looked at the photos at the photo of what Jesse Marcel Jr. and now Jesse Marcel the third, as well as Denise Marcel, the grandson and granddaughter of the military officer who was the fall guy for Roswell, basically
Mhm.
are still selling this beam, but the one they're selling does not say anything that Tom DeLonge said. So I'm wondering what part of the craft is he talking about. But have you heard that?
No, I haven't. Did that was that included in one of the last episodes of Unidentified?
Actually, I got this from Joe Rogan interviewing Tom DeLonge.
Oh, okay. Okay, maybe I have heard that. I
Because
don't know.
that was very interesting that if it did have something in Greek, that would confirm, obviously, that when you talk about ancient aliens and that the old Greek
Mhm.
gods and Roman gods and Egyptian gods were, in fact, non-terrestrial beings.
Totally. Yeah, that would connect a huge piece to the puzzle.
Yes, yes. Now, has anything scared you and stopped you while you were investigating?
Yeah, actually, one of our episodes it was called The Glove. It was this house that had been in this guy's family for generations, and his great grandfather had owned it, and they were actually seeing apparitions of that they confirmed was his great grandfather. But there was a lot of weird things that happened here. But I was in the basement, and this was the first time this ever happened to me. But I was alone, and I felt this really super intense presence behind me that I've never ever felt before, and it felt really threatening. And my first reaction was I want to run upstairs, but I was like, I can't do it. I got to stick it out and experience this and see what happens. But I mean, I was like, I had to constantly turn around because I felt like this super like abusive, threatening presence was behind me, and I maybe that was the great grandfather. I don't know, but that's one that it's really
One
memorable
that
and
will
kind of
never come out of your
frightening at the same
memory,
time.
right? One of those that really sticks out.
Yeah, right. Yep.
I'm always wondered if the reason why they get so angry and maybe throw objects is because what we're doing is intruding in their space.
That is true. Yeah, that's a very good point.
But see,
Yeah.
then you also have to make the argument, well, yeah, well, they had their time on this earth, and now it's time for a current human to occupy that building. And if we allowed all the ghosts to keep their buildings, and like you mentioned earlier, the theory that materials in buildings actually have the property or ability to absorb some of the powers of the entities that were in life, and therefore that's why they are projecting these entities in death. If we allowed this to
Mhm.
happen, then we'd have so many homes that would be abandoned by living humans and just be for ghosts. And if that was the case, then can you think of how many more homes we would have
Materials
to
in
have
building.
built for people?
Yeah. Yeah, that's wild to think about. And you wonder too, like, are more people experiencing spirits and all kind of like trying to communicate with them more.
That's true.
You
Very
know what I mean?
true. Now, since we have run a little over and we are about to bring our second guest on, I want to give you, first of all, I want to give thank you for coming on the show and for also taking the people's questions.
Yeah, of
As
course.
much as it's been breaking up, hey, we made it work, right? And If you have a final statement.
Yeah, we did it.
Yeah, we did it. That's right. We did it, and we definitely have to do it again because an hour is never enough. If you had a statement to say to everybody, a final one, what would you say to everybody?
I would say keep watch Alien Highway if you're really interested in UFOs and extraterrestrials, because we find some pretty cool stuff when we talk to some really, really interesting people. But yeah, like I said, our episode this Wednesday is Roswell, and we're basically searching for a cave where some of the debris is rumored to be hidden from the crash. So, yeah, I mean, it's just all fascinating.
Well, I know for sure we all are going to be tuning in. And with that, Heather, again, thank you. And let me tell you that your co-host is on, Chuck Zukowski. So I figured,
Hello,
the two of
Chuck?
you might as well have it. Hello.
Hey, I was just kicking it back listening to you, Heather. Wow, I was just going to let you just take over the show next time. Yeah, you bet.
Oh, no. It's your turn now.
Yeah, now,
Yeah, it's my
see,
turn
there
now.
were some questions that I posed to Heather, Chuck, that she said, well, you know what, you should ask Chuck. He knows more about the UFOs. So with that being said...
So like why she wears those cat...
Yeah. Well,
Well, why she wears so many different types of glasses?
So there you go. Well, with that being said, Heather, thank you for joining us, and feel free to hop off whenever you want, unless you wanted to stay on. It's totally up to you. And Chuck, let me first start asking you this. I asked this of everybody involved in ghosts and UFOs, particularly ghost hunters. And I'm assuming you've been ghost hunting before Alien Highway, right?
I've had my share, not as much as Heather. She's the experienced one, and I look to her for advice and how to approach things differently. I actually learned to do ghost investigations so I could tell the difference between alien abductions and ghosts.
Well,
so that's why I got into
what?
it. Just
You
before
actually are really on top of my second question that I'm going to, get to in a second here. Let me start with the first one, which is more about ghosts in general. Have you ever had a ghost that spoke to you in a non-terrestrial, not a non-terrestrial language, but a dead language, like Sumerian?
You like Sumerian?
Yes. Yes.
I heard the same question.
Oh, you did?
No,
okay.
No, and no, I never have, and it's only because the ghost investigations that I've done are in mining towns and here in Colorado Springs and Estes Park. So a lot of them were basically in Colorado, where English would be the spoken language. I would assume. My wife and I were in Scotland last month, just on vacation. And I tried to do an EVP session. There was too many people around. And I was kind of hoping that if I did pick up something, it wouldn't come across as English. It should come across as language, in my opinion. If you're gonna pick up a dialect, you're gonna pick up possibly language. I'm not the one. I don't believe that that every ghost knows how to speak any particular language just because that person is doing an EVP session. So,
That's true.
If they spoke, so if they spoke Spanish, you're going to hear Spanish. If they spoke, whatever, you're going to hear that. And that's what I kind of hoping that didn't happen. But, no, I got some pretty good EVPs, and I can tell you, and hello to your audience too, by the way.
Yeah, thank you. I didn't make a proper introduction. The one and only Chuck Zukowski. He's the other host of Alien Highway, along with your son, right?
That's right. That's right.
What Heather was able to say.
Heather, she's just a pleasure to work with. My son Daniel just got back from Slovenia with the Colorado National Guard, so he actually missed the first episode last week because he was in another country, and they didn't have the opportunity to watch it. So he's pretty excited to watch the first one and the second one this Wednesday.
Please do me a favor and tell him thank you for his service to our country. Oh,
thank you very much. He really appreciates that. He's full-time law enforcement, and then he's part-time military, and he's been doing that probably as long as he's been involved in law enforcement. My other son, oldest son, Chuck, is in South Korea. He's in the regular army. He was in law enforcement, and about a year and a half ago, he goes, Dad, he says, it's getting too dangerous to be a cop. I'm going back into the army.
Really? So it was too dangerous to be in the law enforcement, so he decided to go back in the military. And you said in South Korea, so chances are he's at the zone. What do they call that? The one latitude that separates North and South Korea?
Yeah, I talked to him briefly on Father's Day, and because he's a day ahead of us. And he's been working 7 12-hour days. He's just so tired. And he's on his way back in July. So, in about 3 weeks or so, 2 weeks, they start, getting ready to pack up and come back, because he's been there for about a year now. And he's really happy. His base is in Texas. But he was prior military. He was prior Army, and then he went into the Colorado Guard while he was a law enforcement. And him and Daniel were both deployed to Guantanamo.
Gitmo,
So, it was kind of cool that both the brothers were deployed together at Guantanamo, and they were there for about a year or so. Think about each other's backs.
That's actually
really not a lot going
safe.
on
That
they're MP.
If you're sent to Gitmo on behalf of the military, that's actually something I wouldn't fear too much, as say being sent to Afghanistan or Iraq or something near Iran at this point if you were in the Navy.
Exactly. And, my oldest son has already been in Iraq and Afghanistan, and then Daniel's already been in Iraq. And so when they got deployed to Gitmo, it was like they're getting deployed to, a resort.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Camp Delta, right? Yeah. Camp Delta. Now, let me bring you back to the other question I was going to ask you, which if you heard it from Heather's interview. The second question is because, and this was what I was saying, you were just right on top of it when you got into ghost hunting, when you were trying to identify the difference between alien abduction and possibly ghosts. Now, have you ever seen a ghost of an ET?
Have I seen a ghost or an ET? I've seen shadows. I haven't really seen an apparition, but I have seen, and it's really weird because it's kind of scary because you're in and I'm sure Heather's seen this too. You're in an area that's completely dark, yet you see darker images in what you thought was already dark go by, and I've had some EVPs and had some responses to my questions. So I think I'm part of that group of people out there that totally believes in life after death, and I don't have a problem with that. As you're growing up, you're like going, "What's going to happen when we die? Is there a heaven? Is there what's going to happen?" But when you do ghost investigations and you're actually able to communicate with the prior living, then there is life after death, and there's that some form of comfort that you can take with you now. It's a little different than alien stuff, but it's interesting. And I'll be honest with you, out of all my investigations, I mean, I've tracked Bigfoot, I've looked for aliens, UFO, you name it. Ghosts scare me the
You know what? You're not the only one. And you know what? Let me say this to you, Chuck. I myself, if I had to choose between seeing an alien, a ghost, or Bigfoot, I would definitely not fear so much being even abducted as I would seeing an apparition, because they're able to appear out of nowhere and really scare the crap out of you. Especially if they're haunting a building that you're in and you see inanimate objects moving around and stuff like that. That scares me a lot more than seeing gray little guys coming into a room and taking me on board a ship or something like that through a wall.
Oh, absolutely. I think the problem for me is there's And I do actually have an idea how to combat ghosts, or I should say, non-friendly spirits. But at least there's a fight or flight type of scenario you can get into. But with ghosts, they're there, and you can't hit them.
That's right. That's right. Whatever you hit them with will go right through them.
They'll just stay right with you.
Yeah. If you try to hit them with the bat,
and they'll even follow you home.
Yeah. Even worse, then you're going to bring back a poltergeist into your home. Now, you did say you started...
But I have had... There was a...
I'll let you...
I'm sorry.
No. Go ahead. I'll say my question.
I was going to say there's one opportunity or one time that I was with a good buddy of mine, Joe Fex, who is a Bigfoot investigator. And basically, he was the one that was training me, to investigate Bigfoot, because there's been a lot of UFO sightings associated with Bigfoot. So that's why I got into Bigfoot. And we actually had one track us. We were tracking it, and then the tables were turned, and it started tracking us. And that was over by Golden, Colorado. And that's one of those events I'll never forget, because you don't realize, it's what you're dealing with until you actually deal with it, like a ghost, right, or a spirit. It's easy to say, well, I'll do this or I'll do that if I ever, meet one face to face. But when you actually confront some of the vicinity, then it's a whole different ballgame, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Now, a lot of people who have had alien abductions talk about this high strangeness that follows them after their abduction. For instance, poltergeist activity happening in their home. Have you come across a lot of cases like that from abductees?
That's actually happened to me with ghost investigation, because I forgot, I didn't close it out properly, and one followed me home and was hanging around for a couple of days, as far as I figured. But with abduction cases, it's kind of really interesting, because a lot of I have to be honest with you, when it comes to abduction cases, the more serious ones, you don't really get an opportunity to investigate, because the people disappear, and it's really scary, because it's and I don't know where they go. If they just leave on their own, or the military picks them up, or whatever. But when you start taking an interest in someone who is seriously an abductee, and not one that just thinks they are, but actually has, all the indications and the evidence that they are, they end up missing it. And at one point, I was working with, just drew a blank, a podiatrist that was taking out alien implants.
You're not talking about Roger Lear.
Roger Lear.
Yeah, great guy. I did 2 documentaries with him, multiple shows with him, and then he passed away too early, 5 years ago, actually. This past March was his 5-year anniversary.
Yeah, and I had talked to him a couple of times over some investigations. I think it's been in California. And we had a couple here just outside of Colorado Springs that was abducted daytime, 12:30 in the afternoon, right out of their pickup truck.
Jeez.
At lunch. And they could see their pickup truck here rising above their pickup truck. At first, as I'm very analytical as an investigator, and somewhat skeptical, because all my investigations are on my dime, pretty much. It's me spending my personal time to investigate, and my money. So I'll go through, some of this stuff coming towards me, and I'll pick the ones that I can spend the best amount of time to do, rather than just, do a sloppy job. And so I interviewed this couple, and they said, oh yeah, we even have implants in our arms, and we got X-rays of them from our chiropractor. We both have pains in the same part of our arm. And sure enough, I saw the X-rays, and I kid you not, the same place, exactly the same place, right where your arm bends, their right arm, they had some type of foreign structure in there, and they had no entry wound. Okay, I could see no scar, but you could definitely see there was something in there. And so over a period of a month or so, I was able to get approval from their chiropractor via paperwork back and forth, because there's that patient, client, doctor type of, privilege there. And I talked to him over the phone, and he says, it's the largest thing. I can't explain it, but there's something in their arms. And so I contacted Dr. Lear, and because I said, well, this is out of my realm now. Now I got to go to either Daryl Sims or Dr. Lear. And I had met Dr. Lear before a couple times through some lectures. So I got in touch with him, and he got in touch with the people, and back and forth for a couple of weeks. And he was going to send this to fly out to his office in California, and he was going to remove the implants. And he called me on a Saturday. He says, Chuck, they're not picking up their phone. I've been trying for a couple of days now. I said, okay, I'll go down and talk to them. So I went to their house, really empty, just gutted, done.
Really?
And I talked to one of the neighbors, and they said, and one of the neighbors says, they were there one day and they were gone the next. It was like they moved out overnight.
Like
and
they moved?
No one saw anything.
Like literally they moved, packed everything up, and just left?
Well, here's the funny thing: no one saw any trailers. Normally when you move, you pack, you do all this stuff.
Of course.
So whatever they did,
or a full car full of stuff with, maybe stuff tied on top of a car, or the back of a pickup truck or something.
So I guess they did, or they moved, or somebody moved them out of there, during the middle of the night, and that was it. And the phone didn't work after that, so they were gone. And I've had a couple of cases like that where it seems like it's an actual thing, and you go to try to pursue it, and you get sidelined and roadblocked, for someone coming in or they leave or whatever. So it's a really hard investigation to do when you're dealing with a real abductee, because they're being monitored. Yeah, they're being monitored not only by the aliens, but they're being monitored by by the military too, I'm sure, because they're tracking. We have some really cool technology, and I'm pretty sure we're tracking the presence of the aliens and.
Well, let me ask you this, Chuck.
So,
As far as what you're talking about, our technology, you said we have some pretty cool technology, which is absolutely correct. If you look, at the 80s, I've said this a couple times on the show recently, the 80s to me I thought was the pinnacle of the coolest shit, right? I mean, wow, you had VCRs, camcorders, I couldn't think you could get better than that. They finally released the stealth, the SR-71, and then the stealth. We were really at the top of our game. But look at now, 2019. Take 35 years going into the past. Look at the movie Back to the Future. The technology has jumped so hardcore. Who would have thought that a giant word processor that could really do crap other than that, right, would turn into these small smartphones that are so much capable than even the lunar module, let alone with all the computers they had at Houston.
Exactly. And a lot of the websites say that I've been in law enforcement for 30 years, and that's not really true. I was in law enforcement for 8 years, and I was terminated over an incident where I was doing a cattle mutilation or horse mutilation investigation. But I was a volunteer deputy and for 8 years. But I'm a full-time microchip designer. I'm an IC mass design engineer, and I've been doing that just about 30 years now. So in the 80s, when you were talking about the 80s, in the mid-'80s, when I was working at Rockwell, I was part of a team designing Brilliant Eyes, which was a spy satellite. So, we were already in Brilliant Eyes. I can talk about it now because, everybody knows about it. But, it's one of those satellites that you only need 3 or 4 of them out there. You don't need a lot of them. And instead of scanning the Earth, it just looks, and it can see everything at once. There's no scanning. And it's just like peripheral vision
all the time.
And that was back in the mid to late 80s. And then I worked on a deep space probe that was for JPL and some other pretty cool stuff. So as a microchip designer and some of these these designs, I kind of have an idea of what we should have and what we shouldn't have at this point.
Well, the reason why I was asking you about this is the book The Day After Roswell by Lieutenant Philip Corso talks about the fact that we have our technology because of alien artifacts that he seeded into companies like IBM.
Right. And because he worked with the Foreign Technology Department, I think he was under General Trudeau, was it?
Yeah,
but,
that's right. General Trudeau at the Foreign Technology Department R&D division in the Pentagon, and he had an unlimited fund.
Right.
He had that 3-file cabinet, and he had things like the laser pointer, and he said when he would point it, it would burn a hole in the wall. He had a piece of an alien lens, which he says was actually to correct light, and that's where we got our night vision from. And he had this weird wafer that had like wires on it, and that's what ended up being what we call a circuit chip nowadays.
Yeah, and what's interesting about that, and the way the book read, and the way that he talked about it, and then I have a transcript when he talked to Paula Harris in Europe. I've got a transcript that's been translated. So I got a little extra information. But when he talked about that stuff, it totally makes sense because we have universities and we have private companies and public companies that already have government contracts for certain types of projects. And so at the time, he was looking at this material and goes, okay, what companies, what universities are we contracting with right now, military-wise? What are they working on? And will this fit into that scenario where, they may have some idea what this might do? And so he was filtering all that material out, just through the contracts. And not only that, but just see if you're, like right now, I'm a contractor. I've been contracting for over 20 years. It makes it easier for me to leave my job and go do an investigation without asking my boss or anything because, I just, I'll be back.
Yeah.
And I'm my own boss. So, but basically, right now, I've signed, confidentiality, contracts and all kinds of stuff with the company I'm at now, and we're working on some pretty cool technology. And so those other companies have done the same thing. So it makes sense to filter the product, filter that material out to them. And this guy, he was a heck of a guy. He helped back the POWs from Vietnam. He had, 2-3 Christmas trees worth of medals on his chest. And after The Day After Roswell book came out, he died, a year or so later?
No, I think it was even 6 months.
Military,
yeah.
Oh, yeah, even earlier than that, yeah. The military, the Army never came out and said anything negative about him.
No, you're absolutely right.
Well
they never came out and debunked him and never had a press conference saying, hey, The Day After Roswell is a fictionalized account and this never happened. Nobody. You're absolutely right. Nobody's ever come out to say anything. Now, you've had other researchers say, well, I don't believe him. Kevin Randall, for whatever reason, didn't believe him. But that doesn't take away from the fact that the military themselves have never come out and said exactly what you were just saying, that they never, debunked what his claims were.
Well, I don't know what's going on with Kevin Randall, and I like Kevin Randall back in the day when it was Randall and Schmidt, right?
When they were writing books together. That's right. Yeah.
And then somewhere within the past 8 years or so, Randall kind of flipped the 180. And it seems like he's become more of a disinformationist, even with Roswell. And I thought it was really interesting. And he was one of the first people that actually dug at the debris site that Heather was talking about. When my sister and I dug, we did an archaeology dig back in 2002 for the Sci-Fi Channel under Dr. Bill Dolman with the University of New Mexico. And then we actually found a piece of debris there. Found
did you?
The area.
You found something?
Yeah, but we found the location where Randall had dug and Schmidt. So, that was really cool for me to find, the evidence of their digs, because that brought the story to me to life. Like, oh my gosh, yeah, here it was. I see it. He was here. So it was pretty cool. Oh yeah, that's a whole other show we can do. Material that we found the piece of material we found in Roswell in 2002. But we did a press release on that, and Bigelow Aerospace picked it up and did analysis on it. And here comes Bigelow. But I don't know if you're familiar with the book, The 37th Parallel.
No, please tell us.
Okay, well, it was back in 2016 or so. I did this this one episode for the Science Channel, and it was based on my theory of 37th degree latitude.
Isn't that where that separates between North and South Korea?
No. This is basically the paranormal highway across the United States. You know how we have highways,
ley lines,
Interstate
kind
70
of, you mean,
and
right?
40. Yeah, well, you have 70, 40, 60, Route 66 10, and stuff.
Yeah.
Well, right. And so I found that that on the 37th degree latitude, a little bit into 38, a little bit into 36, that there's this corridor that goes across the U.S. where a lot of UFOs can travel. Now, for your listeners out there, I've learned over the years, I hate to say decades, but over the years, that UFOs, balls of light, which are different than orbs that you were talking to Heather about, and I'm with her. Most of the orbs are just, can be easily explained, but they have a tendency of following water and being associated with water. So on a 37th degree latitude, you can hit the majority of our aquifers across the United States. There's also, underground. Well, there's caves, and of course, you have other things like Aztec and Dulce and Area 51. And,
let me ask you this. Do you know the Gilliland Ranch at Mount Shasta? James Gilliland,
right? I think actually...
Is that at the 37th parallel as well?
Oh, no. The 37th goes from Virginia to San Francisco.
Okay.
Right across the middle of the U.S. Yeah. And so... a movie producer had saw that particular episode, called me, and he wanted to do a movie on it. But first, they had to have a book written about it so they could write the script from the book. This is the cart before the horse. And so the famous writer out of Boston, Ben Mesrick, picked up and wrote the book. It was 2 months. It was a New York Times bestselling. It's about me and my investigations and my family and how I got to where I am. And it's called 37th Parallel. So, and then right now it's, movie-wise, New Line Cinema, Warner Brothers picked it up. And, there's a screenplay that's written on it. And basically they're looking for a director or whatever. And that's why and Alien Highway is an opportunity for me, not so much the 37th Parallel, because I sold those rights to the movie studio, so I can't use any of that on TV. But because it's a corridor or freeway, let's say, or a toll road, there's off ramps, right, left and right, and that's all over the U.S. Travels, and that's where Alien Highway comes in. Is all the other sightings, from the top of the U.S. down to the lower parts of Texas. I mean, there's so much stuff going on over here that you could do a TV show on it.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And that actually, I'm not surprised because I've always heard about ley lines, and there happen to be hotspots around, that have more activity that are on a consistent basis as opposed to other places that just are having waves. So this makes sense, and I'm actually glad you explained it to me because I've always heard of ley lines, but I never actually heard of the 37th parallel. So thank you for clearing that up with me. Now let me ask you about we're going to return to abductions here. What different types of ETs have people recalled in the abductions stories that you've heard?
Well, mostly it's just Travis and the Greys. And generally it's either the Greys or the reptilians or combination. But I got to tell you this, and I'm glad you brought this up because a lot of people don't know this. I've had the perfect opportunity to talk to a lot of the Native Americans in the Four Corners region, because I just happen to live in Colorado. And so I've talked to a Native American elder, it's a Cherokee, and then one that's Navajo, at 2 separate times, years apart. And both of them said that there's basically 4 different types of entities on this planet. And I'm going, really, 4? And they go, they said you have the blues and the bookers that protect the planet, and they would be your Menehune from Hawaii, or your leprechauns, or your Tommyknockers. You know, they come out of caves, mountains, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have the ants people. The ants people are the Greys, not because they look like ants, but because they come out of the ground, meaning they might come out of underground bases. But as far as the Native Americans are concerned, they come out of the ground.
Interesting. Let me add on to that, Chuck, because a lot of people talk about USOs, and therefore, if they're going in and out of our oceans, chances are they may have a base or bases, under the Pacific Ocean. Some people say in the channel between Los Angeles and Catalina Island, and therefore that some of these, what you call ants, are living underground on Earth.
That's a great segue for one of our episodes on Alien Highway. We looked at USOs off the coast of California. It's a really good episode, and I wish I could tell you a lot about it, but when you watch it, you'll really enjoy it. The other 2, the reptilians, are the snake people. And so the Greys are the ant people, and then the snake people turned out to be like the reptilians. They're a little taller, and then they had what they call the giants, which turned out, or like the Nordics or the tall blondes or whatever, like the ones that Travis Walton
human-looking
saw.
ones, right?
They're human-looking ones. Their eyes are a little bit offset, very, very dark blue. They're all about the same height. And so when I asked about them, I said, so tell me a little bit about them. And they said, well, the blues live on the planet, and the Greys come and go because they have, their homes are underground, and the reptilians come and go, but at one point, the reptilians, or the snake people, controlled the Greys and used to fight with the blues over control of the planet. And this is when the tall blondes, or the Nordics, or whatever you want to call them, came in, and they set up like a condo here, let's just say, or vacation home, and they come and they keep a check on the reptilians when they come here. To the point, the humans were being used as food based on and slaves based on some of the stories I picked up from the Native Americans. So it's kind of scary, but it turns out that the tall blondes, or the Nordics or whatever, they're the ones that keep everything in check. They're like the galactic police. And if you ever get a chance, and you probably have had a chance to talk to Travis Walton.
Absolutely, great friend
of mine. It's really cool. Yeah, it's really cool who takes control of them. Was it the Greys? No, it was the tall blondes. They're the ones that actually took control. They're the ones that took him at the very end and dropped him back off, to where he needed to be. But so you kind of get that feeling. Now, I've had a lot of people ask me, well, how many aliens do you think are on this planet? I hear sometimes there's 50, sometimes 100, sometimes there's only 2. And I said, I don't care about numbers. I'm just looking for one. Okay? I don't care what species of alien it is. I want to find one. I want to get enough evidence just for one that I can put out there, to the world and say, here you go. Here it is.
Oh, I'm with you, Chuck, because you know what? It's not like we can grab one for an interview and say, hey, I need you for 2 hours tomorrow so you can answer some questions, about, where you live and all this. No, they're very elusive, these damn things.
Exactly. I wrote a blog a few years ago. My website's ufonut.com for anybody out there, because I when I first started doing this, people were calling me a nut. Well, you're just some UFO nut, so I decided to roll with it and did a website. But I did a blog because I got tired of hearing all these people, especially scientists, people in the science field, and I'm in the science field, right? But I can't stand these people that come out and say, well, if they're here, then why aren't they doing this?
Yeah, why aren't they landing on the White House
here?
lawn or crap like that? Yeah.
Yeah. Why? So why? No, seriously, people. Why do we think that aliens think like us? They don't. Okay, they have their own agenda. They think differently. I think differently from a cow. A cat thinks definitely like differently than me.
Yeah.
And so I wrote a blog. I said, I'm just getting tired of this stuff. So I wrote a blog that said, to know an alien, you got to think like an alien. And the only way to think an alien is to know an alien. So it ain't going to happen. So for all this stuff that we see going on, and we're trying to figure out why they're doing it, just forget it. We won't ever be able to figure out why they're doing what they're doing. We can only speculate. And maybe we can gather enough evidence, we might be able to catch them at the act. But until we actually get one on your show and interview them,
right?
It's just all speculation, and it's all it is.
Now, recently, and this is huge because we're never going to have disclosure as the skeptics one, right? We're not going to have a bunch of UFOs landing on the White House lawn and flying over stadiums and, one coming out saying, take me to your leader, and then President Trump coming out and saying, by the way, everybody, just so you know, we've had visitors from space and we've lied to you for decades, and they could come in and out of our airspace, they could take you out of your homes, we can't do anything about it, but we just thought we'd like to let you know. Never going to happen.
Yeah.
But at the same time, when we had those two DOD of videos that came out of those Navy pilots, to me, I thought that was some sort of disclosure, because that's the first time since Roswell, really, that you had the military coming out saying, here is video of something that we don't know what its origins are. And it's violating our aerodynamics. It's violating our known laws of physics by the way it travels. And right there, I think that's the first step to a soft disclosure, if you want to call it that.
Exactly. And here we go again. Thank you for that other segue. We have another episode that we interview, my team interview pilots, particular pilots that have had sightings, and it's really cool. That's going to be part of the our Arizona episode, and we have so much cool stuff to share with the public. I just can't wait. But anyway,
I'm assuming in the Arizona subject, you're going to be talking about the Phoenix Lights too, I would think.
Oh, maybe.
Okay, yeah, you can't really say. Well, we'll all find out soon enough, because the show's already started there.
I lived in California, and there was a yeah, I think it was what was it, 97? Was it?
Yeah,
I can't remember. I think that was around there.
Unfortunately, I was there 2 days before and left. I left a couple of days before, and I missed it, and I've kicked myself in the butt so many times. Yeah, I wish I was there, and that was 22 years ago. When you think, that's a long time ago.
Right, it's a long time ago. I was in California. And so I started researching the Phoenix Lights, and at the time I was talking to Bill Hamilton, who was a big, big researcher, investigator on the Phoenix Lights at the time. And I actually found a military person over near the California-Arizona border that experienced the craft flying over from that. Now it's known that it came from that direction, but at the time, it was flares and whatever.
Yeah,
but,
I remember that BS.
It just takes a little bit of research and a little bit of investigation, and you're going to find someone out there that that's actually seen it. Well, that's our jobs, right? And
well, the governor, remember,
so,
2007, 10 years later, Fife Symington, he came out and said, that press conference, I'm sorry, he apologized for it and said that he himself saw it, and he described how large it was, and he said it flew above his house, and he watched it just travel really slowly fairly close enough to the ground where some people even claim that if they were able to throw something like hard enough and far
Right.
enough that they would be able to hit it. But it blacked out all the stars behind it, meaning that there were
Right.
there was definite structure there.
Right. And yeah, and let's go back to what you said earlier about disclosure. Disclosure is not going to happen overnight. It just doesn't get it. But it's happening now, and we are right in the middle of. We're actually still towards the maybe halfway into disclosure, because exactly what you said. The governor came out, right? We've had. Was it Schiff? I forget, the congressman. I interviewed a congressman also that was releasing information about UFOs. So we've had political figures out there. Now we're seeing a rash of pilots now coming forward about this, military pilots, commercial airline pilots. We had the Pentagon come out a couple of years ago, and you find out, oh, yeah, they had this multi-million-dollar project. All that money went to Bigelow. Here, that pops up again. Bigelow's in the book because I did some. Well, he's the one that ended up with that little Roswell debris stuff, and he also ended up buying this Skinwalker. Now you're seeing what was it? The Navy came out and said, "Oh yeah, now we're going to start taking this stuff seriously," and it seems like more and more every month. This is a great time for UFO researchers and investigators, and for for people like you, for hosts like you, your radio shows. There's so much stuff going on right now that I think we're in part of watching disclosure, because everybody's acknowledging, oh yeah, guess what? We don't understand what we just saw. Fighter pilots goes too fast. The turns are too quick. It's just, the G-force not only would kill the passenger, but it would collapse the structure itself. We don't have a structure like that, that can do that. Even with drones, I mean, as fast as they turn, the inertia of the weight of the structure itself and what's inside is going to slam in it. And if you try to shore that up and make it stronger, you just have to increase the power, right, which makes the structure bigger. So I mean, it's one of those multiplying effects, which that's not what we see. So it's pretty cool right now, and I think we're in it.
Absolutely, and you know what? Like you said, you mentioned if a human pilot was there, they'd be dead from the inertia. They would be slammed so far onto the other side when that object stops and literally stops it and goes into another direction, or makes these 90-degree turns at extreme speeds. They've been reported by astronaut Gordon Cooper. I believe at like 7,000 miles per hour. I mean, holy crap!
Yeah.
Mach 7. I didn't even know we can get that fast, and apparently in our atmosphere they sure can. Now, I have a question for you in the chat here. Let me find it for you. This is from Lasha Sanyak, and it reads: does he think that the military may be experimenting with alien DNA?
Of course. Yeah, sure. What they picked up from Roswell and Aztec and whatever else, Texas and
Mexico,
absolutely,
right?
I believe that.
California from the Battle of Los Angeles apparently netted 2 crashes for crash and retrievals. Yeah.
Well, yeah, but I mean, one of our episodes. Thank you for another segue. One of our other episodes is we look at the story, and it's a great story. And really, this story was based on, or the movie Paul was based on this story, where an alien escaped from Area 51 by help, not by itself, but it was helped. But if you've ever seen the movie Paul, it's really funny. So we look into that. We go to the areas, in the Tonopah area, not too far out of Area 51, and we researched, we talked to the people there, and I don't want to go too much into it, but it's a great episode. I think I forget what the name of the episode is, but it'll be coming up. But it's such a great story that this alien had escaped from Area 51. Now, back in the day, when I was investigating it, the alien was called EBE for extraterrestrial biological entity.
That's right, EBEN, or that's what Linda Moulton Howe talks about.
EBE, right.
Yeah. And that's also what one of the ones, the ETs that was captured, that S4, that's what labeled was EBE1 and EBE2 for the two different ones that were there. I'm glad you mentioned that. Lasha is she's asking a follow-up question to the question about military with the alien DNA. It reads, what are they trying to do with it?
I wish I could tell you. I mean, once again, this is the whole thing about trying to understand what aliens are thinking. All we can do is speculate, and based on, I really don't know. Obviously, we're humans. And we have a tendency of studying, right? That's what we do. So if we pick up something, we find something that we're not familiar with, we're going to study it and try to understand what it is and how to figure it out. And when it comes to an alien, once we get beyond that point of trying to figure out what it is, then we have to figure out, is it harmful to us? And then if we figure out it is, then we got to figure out how we can protect ourselves from that. I mean, it goes on and on and on, and then can we take the technology and advance ourselves with it? This is kind of interesting. I guarantee you we have flying triangles that, and I've interviewed lots of people that see them, little kids to retired senior citizens from the military have seen these things.
TR3Bs?
Yeah. Well, this is your basic triangle. It's been around for a long time. And they defy the laws of physics. They float. They skip a quarter of a mile in the blink of an eye, and then they're gone, right? And we have this technology. So if we have this technology, this is for the skeptics out there that are listening to the show. Well, we have this technology, and people like you may be going, well, you know what? We think that it's alien technology that's either the aliens or maybe it's reverse engineering. And and there's a function within our military, our government, or part of the CIA that has control of that. And most of the skeptics will go, "Oh, that's what it is. It's ours." Okay, so let's go ahead and take the skeptic point of view. Here we have this technology that defies the laws of physics. It leaves no chemical traces. It doesn't consume petroleum, right? It's this advanced technology that puts the country and the world beyond to a next level and eliminate pollution completely, and it's being kept from us. Okay, that's the skeptic's point of view. That's the answer to them. So how do you feel about that? Would you feel better to know that someone within our government is keeping this technology from us for their own personal goals of getting a world power?
Yeah, I was going to say for getting further and having something over other countries. Right?
Yes. Or would you prefer to know that it's an alien? I would prefer to think it's an alien, and then that our government is that criminalistic, if that's even a name, or even a word. But but I do believe that there is some handshaking in between where we are handling, alien technology. Now, from the cattle mutilation investigations that I've been doing for the past 20-some years. I can guarantee that the military is not part of this. The government's not part of that. But I can tell you also, a lot of the events where animals have been mutilated, within a week or so after the mutilation, there will be an unmarked helicopter, not all of them, just some, doing their own investigation. And I'll tell you right now, I'll tell you to your listeners, I've been doing this so long now that you know how I have a couple of informants and we use them for the show. Mm-hmm. But as it turns out, I'm an informant for someone within the military or within the government.
Wow!
And it's happened twice to me. It's happened with the Roswell debris that we found, and it's happened with animal mutilations. I got 2 times within a few years apart. About this time at night, this is 8:39. 9 o'clock at night, I get a phone call on my cell phone, and it's a very polite gentleman, Mr. Zukowski. Can you tell us about these cattle mutilations and what you think about them and what you found. And I tell you what, I'm more than happy to help anybody with their investigations. Okay, so that's not an issue with me. I'm not one of these people where I'm not going to help. And so there's someone there that is looking for answers, and I'll tell them everything I know. And I said, if you have any other questions, give me a call. It also happened with the Roswell debris. What did you find out about the debris? Where'd you find it? What do you think it is? Da 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 da. What was your properties? Very, very specific questions. And at the end of our 20-minute conversation, thank you, Mr. Zukowski, it's a pleasure talking with you. And I said, call anytime.
Well, you know what? As you mentioned, Chuck, that we're living in magnificent times with the soft disclosure and everything else going on. I think it's really cool that you are actually informing someone inside the government, because it shows, like you said, they're looking for answers. And chances are, maybe once they get enough answers, maybe we'll start having more of these videos released by the DoD, and maybe a few more pieces of data that will just confirm what me and you already know.
That's right. And there's like the couple of informants that help me and help us through the show. What they're trying to do is, they're still working. But they're trying to get some of the information out, but they have to give the information out in such of a cryptic way. They just can't hand it to you and say, here you go, because, there's trails to that. And as, former law enforcement, that's evidence. That's evidence that someone can find and catch you at, right? Just ask Snowden, right? That's what he's still in Russia. So there are people right now within the government, within the military, that want to get the information out. They don't want to be known. So they're your whistleblowers to a point. And some of the stuff I get from them, some of it pans out and some of it doesn't, or maybe I just don't understand the part that doesn't pan out. But it's or it's not a whistleblower. It's actually part of the act of releasing information to the public. Because the National Disinformation Act, remember that was, I don't know if that's still around or not, but the whole point of the National Disinformation Act was, the military or our government cannot lie to the American people, to the American citizens, cannot lie. Well, so much for politicians, they do it all the time. But for the military, you can't lie. So they came up with this National Disinformation Act that basically said, okay, if you tell a little bit of the truth, you can tell some lies, but you have to tell a little bit of the truth, and you can tell a lot of untruth. So some of the information we get, you have to pick it apart and try and find that one little segment in that information that may lead you to your investigation or may lead you to where you think you may want to be, and the rest is all just fluff, pretty much.
Chuck, I can't say there's no cooler place to leave off this show than what you're telling me right now, that you have informants that are helping you and vice versa, that you yourself are being someone that's helping them. And you made a good point that the best way for disinformation is to have a big lie with a bunch of small truths, or a big truth surrounded by a bunch of small lies. And that's how good disinformation works. It's embedded with the two. Now, with that being said, I'm going to ask you to hang on real quick so I could talk to you off air. But real quick, before I plug in my website and everything else like that, if you had a final statement, what would it be? And of course, tell people where they can find you.
Well, first off, since the book came out a few years ago, I've had probably 18 different production companies contact me about doing a show, and I kind of wasn't interested. And then Rick, out of Three Ball, contacted me, the creator of the show, and we were on board on how I wanted to do this. Now, I guess there's some production fluff in there, too, to make it appeasing to the viewers and stuff. But the majority is we want to get the information out. And that's what Alien Highway is all about. Real investigations, real places, real people, and that's why Travel Channel loves it, because we're on location all the time, and our interviews are outside and all that. So for all the informants out, for all the government people out there, if you watch Alien Highway, you're going to learn something. And for all your listeners out there, watch it. And then seriously, you can go to my website, ufonut.com. If there's something you don't like, or you have a question, or you say, why didn't you do this? Email me, and I'll email you back. I email everybody. It may take me a little bit. There's a lot of emails, but I'll email it back. I had one person ask me with the last episode, the Skinwalker Ranch, where this brilliant light popped up. He says, well, why don't you fly a drone out there at night and see where that light was coming from? I said, because it's against FAA rules and regulations. We cannot fly a drone at night. That's all there is to it. And if we flew a drone at night on the show, we would get pinged in violation of FAA. So that's just a simple, answer to his question. So certain things like that. UFOnet.com is my website. Alien Highway. My TV show, my staff, or my hosts with me, my son Dan, and of course Heather, Taddy. She's just phenomenal. It's people to work with, and it's such a pleasure to work with, and it really helped me find evidence that I was looking for.
Well, with that said, Chuck, I will definitely be tuning in myself for Alien Highway. Maybe there's a bunch that I have. You know what? Truthfully, the more I learn, the more questions I have. It's truly exponential. So I know I'm going to learn more, and I know I'm going to have more questions, and I'm going to want to have you back after the end of the 8 shows that are premiering after this. We're already tomorrow's the second show, right?
Yes, we're on the second show. Yeah, this one's going to be on New Mexico. It's pretty
on the
cool.
Roswell.
Pretty cool.
Yeah.
Oh, one last thing. One last thing real quick. I just got inked yesterday to lecture at the UFO Congress this year.
Ooh,
so,
interesting.
And so I'll be talking about cool things about the show and some, interesting things that didn't make this, the show. And anyway, we're going to have some fun with that. But I talked to my buddy Alejandro Rojas.
Yeah.
He says, "Hey, dude,
we have
an open slot. You want it?" I'm going, "Well, of course I want it." Alejandro and I go way, way back. When he lived out here in Denver, we've done some investigations together. He's a cool guy.
Oh, I didn't know he lived in Denver. I've only known him since, I started attending the UFO Congress back in 2012. That's when I first met him. And I was instrumental in getting Representative Merrill Cook from the Citizen Hearing to speak at the 2016 UFO Congress. That was the last year that I was involved there. But yes, that's the International UFO Congress, great place to be, and I hope you're gonna be one of the key speakers, and I know it's always a great time. Is this your first time speaking, by the way, there?
No, actually, I spoke the very first time I moved to Phoenix. I was the very first speaker at the very first conference in Phoenix when Congress moved from Laughlin.
I remember when it was at first Laughlin. Yeah. Well, you know what? That's pretty cool. I'm actually curious if I've ever been somewhere and you were there, and for some whatever reason we didn't pass or cross our paths. Considering I've been involved in this proactively for over 7 years, and you've been speaking at Congress and being involved in other investigations for longer than me. So, with that being said, I want to thank you on the air. Thank you for appearing. Like I said, we'll definitely do this. And let me give some shout outs here too. My social media manager, please everybody check out her website, unitedtruthseekers.com. And of course, I want to thank everybody who's listening, especially those people on YouTube, because that is the only chat that I pay attention to. So in the future, folks, if you have questions, go to YouTube. Yes, you can hear from other sources. iHeartMedia, 107.7 FM, New Orleans, Louisiana is another source. But if you want your questions to be asked on air to the guest, that is where you go. The only thing you need to remember with regards to the show, folks, is the name of it. That is Dr. J Radio Live. drjradiolive.com is the website. At DRJ Radio Live is the username for Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Flickr, Tumblr, you name it. Minds is a new one. Patreon, of course. And definitely, of course, YouTube, as you all already know, as it is right there. You're seeing it right now if you're posting it, as I see many of you are. Now, with that being said, folks, it's officially time for me to sign off.